Well, hello, everyone. This is Jay Lyman from the Seattle Public Library. I want to welcome you here to Your Business Start Smart with Jeff Levy. We're so excited to have you today. We are recording today's session so that others that can't be here today can benefit from this. But we are going to save some time for Q&A at the end too, where we'll turn off the recording if you don't want to have your questions be recorded in that way. So I'm super excited to kick this off, and this is a program that I've seen a lot of times, and it gets better every time. So I know you're in for a treat. I know it's going to be very, very helpful. So I think with that, so save your questions for the end. You can also ask them in the chat. And I guess with that, I'm going to turn time over to Jeff.
Thank you, Jay. And I want to, of course, thank the library for hosting this. Jay and I actually started doing these programs, I'm going to guess about 10 years ago, if not longer. And I think just to put it in perspective, this is probably, hopefully, the start. If you continue your journey to being self-employed, to starting your own business, hopefully this is the beginning of a relationship where you use the library for its resources. And I will give you, before we leave today, other resources that you can use on things that might be more specific to your needs and your business. And as I like to share, if you've attended one of these sessions, I'm always glad to answer a question for you. You can always reach out by phone, text, email. I promise you I'm not going to send you a bill. If I can help you, I'll give you my thoughts. If not, I likely will refer you to someone in the community that can help you. So this is really the beginning. Now, when we get a group this big and this diverse, also, I'm going to suspect that there's a wide range of businesses that you guys are considering. So I'm going to be somewhat generic and talk about things that relate to the startup of any business. And my specialty is really creating the right mindset, the right preparation, knowing what to expect in terms of the elements you're going to deal with in starting a business. So you can see on the first slide, you have my, web page. It's very specific to franchising, which is an area that I spend a lot of time in. But you've got my email and you have my LinkedIn. And again, I'd encourage any of you who want to link in to do that, so we can just sort of follow each other's journey in a way that isn't imposing on anybody. Okay. And just a reminder, you guys will be getting these slides after. So don't feel that you've got to take notes on every slide. Jay will be sending them out to you afterwards, right? Oh. Okay. And we have more people coming in. Okay. So in terms of an agenda, and this is sort of interesting, is now a time for self-employment. If we really had an opportunity to spend more time together, I'd be very interested in your stories as to why you are thinking now is the time to start your own business. We're in sort of a changing economy. I think that it's whenever there's a change in an economy, I think it's always an exciting time and there's always opportunity. And I'll try to talk to that as well. I want to get into today a little bit of the motivations, because I think what often people think about is if they have the right business, then everything is going to work out just perfectly. What I have found over my years is that your motivation, your drive, the reason you're doing it is as important as the product and the service that you provide. I'm going to cover today, which hopefully will cover the breadth of the kinds of businesses people in this group are considering. I'm going to cover starting something from scratch if you have your own idea. I'm going to talk about buying a business and what are some of the elements that you might consider there. And I'm going to talk about a little bit on the franchise talk, although we do want to mention this is the second in a three-part series I'm doing with the library. The first part was sort of maybe the why we do a business and how that sort of fits into your overall life goals. And I'd encourage some of you to see that on the library YouTube channel. It's called Creating a Portfolio Life, and Jay can send you that link. And then we'll talk about some of the very tactical things that are really important. What kinds of incorporation are available to you? Why would you incorporate? What kind of protections they give you? I'll give you a sense of financing options today. We'll talk a little bit about the team that you need to build around you in terms of stakeholders. We'll cover a business plan, and then I will provide you resources. That's a lot to do in an hour, but again, that's why I make sure you guys know that we're not going to just sort of leave you hanging. You can always reach out to Jay or I, specific questions, and we'll try to get you moving in the right direction. I'll give you a brief, maybe some of the highlights of my own business career and why I feel comfortable giving this seminar. And really it's because I've done it myself. In 1984, my wife, 2 young kids, we moved here from New York City. We did a startup technology company in Mukilteo, Washington, literally out of a garage. We raised $2 million for that venture. And oh gosh, after we got our product put together, Microsoft came out with a much better product, and we ended up not being able to go forward in the business. I share that story because not everything goes according to plan, but you can learn something and grow from everything we do as an entrepreneur. About a year later, I became a founder of a company called Windswept Capital. One of our investors saw some qualities in myself, and then in 1986, we bought a small manufacturing company in Renton, and started raising money. And we raised $1 million for that business and took on $5 million in debt. And then in 1992, we sold that business to a public company. That was a good story. And again, it gave me the opportunity to learn, I mean, literally sweeping the floor and learning every aspect of a startup business. And then in 1997, myself and another group purchased the original company that I had helped found back from the public company, and we ran that until 2002. When we did that purchase, we raised $5 million in cash and $30 million in bank debt. I throw those numbers around because, again, you know, we will have to capitalize a business, no matter what we're doing. It could be a small consulting business, but I want to be able to share with you that I can help you think through some of those elements. And then in 2002, I made a significant turn in that I wanted to simplify things and started a coaching consulting business where I do things like this and just share experiences with people and help them think through being in their own business. And then I focus a lot on the franchise world. So enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about motivation. My personal motivation comes out of my growing up, where I grew up with very little and really never wanted to be there again. I did find that my great-great-grandparents were entrepreneurs on their own. They came from the pogroms in Russia and made it to the US in the 1980s. And I've given a lot of thought about their motivation. I'd like to tell you they became Nordstrom. They didn't, but they still created a good foundation. And so a message here is that, you know, what you guys are trying to do is build your own dream. Is if you don't build your own dream, likely somebody will hire you and try to motivate you to build their dream. I think we all recognize today that the job market is not necessarily the most predictable, steady place to provide financial security. I assume some of you might be working for someone else and maybe thinking that a layoff may occur. You know, we all know what's happening in the economy. I actually have lived through layoffs but recessions in 2002, 2009, and of course 2019, the recession and the pandemic. And I have to tell you that hardworking people that have good business plans thrive through those times. There's always opportunities when we have negative economies. So what are your choices today? I think if all of you were to say, I'm in maybe the middle or the next stage of my professional career, there's really only three options that you have from a professional point of view. You can continue to look for the dream job, but some of the data I'll show you today says that tends not to last forever. You can start an independent business if you have your own idea, and we'll talk about the elements of that. And franchising is another option for people to use somebody else's idea to be in their own business. I do want to remind everybody that that there is a risk reward scale when we think of being in our own business. And those who end up moving forward, when they put the risks and the benefits on the scale, tend to put more things on the benefit side, on the dream side. But it's not easy. And Warren Buffett, I think, put it into perspective that starting a business, if you're thoughtful about it, if you're starting smart, you've got a good plan, you're properly financed, it's probably less risky than working for someone else who might just decide for one reason or another that they're better off without you. So this is a slide that I actually put in my original presentation, and it's actually fascinating because I think it's been prescient in that the ideas have come back, through the changes of the pandemic. And so the world of work is different today. You may already be working remotely. People that you work for are going to be different. You're not going to have necessarily the relationship with your manager. And you may never get to retire. So when we think about starting a business during a recession, there really is a world of opportunity. Each of you, and we'll talk about the business plan you put together. If you're thinking of putting it together now, you do have to factor in, what if there is a recession? What if interest rates go up? Those shouldn't be reasons that stop you from moving forward, but they should be reasons to make sure that your plan accommodates for potential changes in the economy. So if all of you just for a moment take your business idea and put it aside, I want you to think of four things. One, what is the income that you want to get from this business? Because when you put together a business plan, it has to pass that smell test, meaning within a reasonable time, can it get you to the point where you are taking money out of the business to support yourself and support the lifestyle that you want? It's not, when you start a business, the first couple of years, of course, will be nose to the grindstone, working hard, getting control of your market to the extent you can. But what do you want that business ultimately to work for you? What is the lifestyle? Then the second thing I want you to think of is, does the business generate wealth? Does it generate wealth so you could put money into a retirement plan, put money into a 401k, and make other investments, maybe buy real estate relating to the business? And then lastly, are you creating value? And the value means that, when you start a business, you are putting a certain amount of capital to work. You're buying computers, you might buy a car, you might buy a truck, you might rent an office. But what is the value that those assets generate for you and create the value? So do you have an exit plan so that equity becomes part of your net worth? So as I interview people who are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs, they oftentimes get so focused on the product that they lose sight of why they're doing it and what the business needs to provide for them and their family over time. So give some thought to what your realistic income goals are, the lifestyle you want the business to create for you, and then make sure that your business plan points you in that direction. And it's not easy. I want to remind people, those of you who think that getting a business card, putting your name on it, the president, means that you've arrived and you're there, everything's good. It doesn't work that way. So it's really spending a few years of your life like other people just won't, because it's hard, so that you can really live the rest of your life so in a way that most people can't. I put this picture up because I want everybody to maybe think about that vision of why you're doing it. And some of us are visual learners. Some of us need to put things in bullet point. Some people just like to read stories, but really find the motivation that's going to drive you through some of the more difficult times when you're starting a business, and the difficult times and challenges, and many people give up. I want to take a moment and just thank you guys and congratulate you for coming today, because in starting any kind of business, there is that element of unknown that creates fear. But the more information you can gather, the more network you can pull together of people you can count on and call, and the more resources you can find in your community, the easier it is to get comfortable moving forward with a business. So coming here today, hopefully, is the beginning of some of that. I want to give you some thoughts about what's going on in the world of people like yourself who are thinking about starting their own business. And so if we go back to March of 2019, compared to today, and I haven't looked at this slide in a while, more people are starting businesses now, which might surprise you, during the pandemic, and even now during what might be a potential recession. And of course, we all know about this, the debt ceiling issue. That's not stopping people from getting business licensing and position themselves for when the economy starts firing up again. And this is not meant to be a negative comment, but it's a true comment that 50% of all adults 50 years or older will lose their job, no fault of their own, if they're working for someone else, and may not recover. Did someone have a question there? Anyway, this is a fairly recent ProPublica article. So part of maybe my gift to you guys is sharing some of this stuff. It might help in the motivation to continue the journey of starting your own business. And just so you know that you're not alone, 1 in 6 people in their 50s are self-employed today. 1 in 6, that's a pretty amazing. And 1 in 3 are self-employed when they get to their 60s. Now, I turned 74 this year. I have a franchise business. I renewed it for the 3rd time because I don't see why, if you enjoy what you do, why not keep working? And a couple of other data points to help you understand what's going on in this idea of starting a business. This graph shows you number of small businesses in the US through the end of 2022. And of course, we know 19 through 22 was a pretty tough year in this country. Businesses, small businesses, are still growing significantly, and their revenues are up as well. And just one last sort of demographic thing to share with you guys on the motivation side. The world that you're in today is one where I believe if we take care of ourselves, we are expected to live much longer than our parents. And so the 21st century life cycle, as identified by Barclays Bank, says people start their careers a bit later. But what happens is when you get into your early 50s, there's a natural career break. And that break happens because your boss changes, a company gets sold, something happens, and age discrimination comes in. And so we think about, what are we going to do for the later years of our life when we live to perhaps 100? Retirement might start in our 80s. So the idea of starting your own business, I think, is something that everybody needs to consider seriously. So the entrepreneur, and I want to get into some of the qualities that you need to evaluate for yourself. you're going to assume risk and responsibility if you're going to start a business. I like to share a story from my own experience where I was asked to do a market study, this back in 1984, for a business that this group I was part of wanted to buy. And I spent a lot of time, I traveled the US, I visited with customers, and I came up with a plan that I believed was going to be just outstanding. And we raised some capital to start the business. And when we went to finalize our banking relationship, the banks asked myself and my partners to sign an unconditional personal guarantee. And all of a sudden, I thought maybe the plan wasn't so good. And what I was realizing then is that the only thing that changed is that I had to really make a high-level commitment to that business plan that I did. And I could have cut and run at that point, but we stayed with it. We took the risk and got back the reward from it. So at some point, each of you will be faced with those kind of decisions, the risk-reward decision, and you'll never be able to advance your business without taking some thoughtful, careful risk, and hopefully those will come out in your business planning. So let's talk about you individually and the qualities that I think you need to start your own business successfully. Are you a self-motivated person, meaning that do you have to look for people to tell you what to do, or are you good at identifying those things that have to be done and putting your effort in without being told? Are you the optimist or are you the pessimist? Do you look at the world as abundant, or do you look at the world as scarcity? Because I will tell you, no matter how good you are, no matter how good your product, you'd think that the world will be just waiting for it, and it's not the case. So you have to be one that brings optimism to the table and can help encourage others to believe in what you believe in. Are you an intentional person? Now, I think the older we get, the more we like to do things that we're comfortable with, and new things are not comfortable, or things that we don't like aren't comfortable. If you're starting a business, you have to determine what are those things that are mission critical that you have to do. And it may be getting up and knocking on doors. It may be going out and going in networking. It may be really doing an excellent job of putting your financials together and your books. We all have things we're comfortable with and things we're uncomfortable. And sometimes the things we're uncomfortable are necessary for the success of the business. Are you ready for professional growth? I will tell you that I've been involved in probably 5 or 6 either acquisitions or business startups. And as I look back on them, each of them have been the most stimulating times in my life. There's a little bit of fear, but there's also the excitement of learning something new. Have you talked to your family, your partner, whatever your circumstance is, and do they understand that you will likely put the business before everything else for a period of time, but you have a vision where the business will more work for you? And lastly, I never want to understate the idea of the risk-reward side of things. I see some chats coming in. I'm just going to take a quick peek. It looks like most of them are from you, Jay.
Most of them are from me. So I'm just sharing some of the links to prior recordings where you can sign up for next week and things. And I didn't see any questions so far.
Okay, yeah, excellent. Well, then I will use a second to take a quick drink of water. So let's now talk about some of the reasons why people start their own business. And I'll talk about it in terms of advantages. What are the things that you should be looking to derive from this next activity that you're going to begin? So, freedom and independence. So I talk in my portfolio of life about a life-changing event that I had where I was choking on a piece of food. And if someone hadn't done the Heimlich maneuver, I would not be here today. And so what it really taught me is that my time is the most valuable thing I have. So starting your own business hopefully will be towards the goal of controlling your life, controlling your time at work. It also should be an outlet for creativity. And again, sometimes when we work for someone else, we're put in within guardrails, and we can't try out new ideas. We can't use our creative self. If you are self-employed and you're going to a cocktail party or a networking event, and pretty exciting that we actually can do those things again without masks and be around people. There's some element of satisfaction and achievement to say, I own my own business. I've been running it for a period of time. I employ a certain amount of people. This is what I bring to the community. So there is this satisfaction and achievement. And then the other thing is the concept of job security. I've been an officer of a public company. I know the reasons why people get laid off or lose their job. And sometimes it has nothing to do with the individual performance. It's just what the goals of the shareholders are. So you're creating your own job security by starting your own business. And of course, businesses can fail, but we want to talk today about things you can do to reduce that chance. The next thing, and I don't know if we have anybody here who comes from a human resources background, but when companies pay people, they pay them within a certain range based on the job description and the years in the position, et cetera. In your own business, there's no potential on your income. You're limited by your own creativity and the nature of the business that you do. And I mentioned before in the income, lifestyle, wealth, and equity goals, the idea that you're all actually growing something. The two best economic returns I've had in my life is when I've been able to sell or be part of the sale of a business that I might have spent years building. So the concept of growing the initial investment, where if you work for someone else, you get paid every 2 weeks, they can say goodbye, and you really haven't built up any value. And hopefully as a reminder to some of you guys, please, if there's questions about any of the things I'm saying, write them down. Both Jay and I are big boys. If we say something you don't agree with, we would love to hear your perspective on things as well. Let's talk about some of the experiential and career skills that I think you need to be running your own business. And if you don't have these skills, certainly some of them can be learned, or some of them can be bought by hiring people. But leadership is really important, and leadership allows you to get people around you that support your vision and support what you're trying to accomplish. Where are you today in terms of being able to market? When I started out my career, I was in sales and marketing. I think the world has passed me by, candidly, in terms of today's social media and social media marketing. Do you have those skills, and do you have a strategy for using the social media platforms to create a brand for your business? Can you raise money if you need it? Can you track it and maintain it? I see a little comma in my slide that needs to come out. Really, really important. I married a math professor, interestingly enough, but she will not do any of the books in my business. She says, it's your business, you've got to do it. And that's not my comfort zone, but you have to learn how to, and it's very easy today with some of the QuickBooks systems, et cetera, but you need to know how to run the books for your business. Can you motivate people? Very important. And the last three things, I think sometimes we forget about. Do we really understand our target market? Do we know who they are, when they buy, how they buy, when they pay, how often they buy? Can you start attracting them to listen to your story? Can you convert people that should be your customers into a predictable sales system? So you can start predicting, looking at key performance indicators as to when sales will likely come in. And then, of course, once you have people coming into your business, can you fulfill on your promise Are there more things that you can sell them? Can you make sure that your business builds on its platform as it goes forward? Jay knows this too. Whenever I do these talks, I don't want to be, just all about the positives. I want to talk a little bit about some of the potential negatives about being in your own business. And I think the reason that it's important to have that discussion is so that you can start working with these negatives that might come up so that you can prepare for them and avoid them. One of my mentors taught me in my career that the best management philosophy is to think about all the things that could possibly go wrong and what can you do in advance of them to either mitigate the impact or avoid them going wrong. So with that being said, how do you deal with stress? If you're not someone that is very even-tempered, if you tend to get frustrated, you've got to figure out how to work with it. I used to go to the candy machine all the time. When I figured out how to deal with stress, I lost about 25 pounds. But risk, responsibility, stress is just part of this journey going forward. The concept of failure, how do you get over that? How do you turn that potential fear into a positive motivator for yourself? Can you recognize that if you are owning your own business, in many cases, you're going to be responsible for making those final decisions. Can you get comfortable with that? I talked before about how this is going to affect your family, more work, longer hours, and less money in the beginning. I want to remind everybody that when we put funds into a business, it's not called, it's called capital, because capital is investable assets you put in a business that are going to work for you and make more money. Recognize that there may be fewer job benefits. It's a thing we all have to get over today. And I don't have a lot of time to talk about what people's options are, but you're going to have to work on making sure you've got your own job benefits. Next, you end up paying yourself last. So you start a business, you've got rent to pay, you've got insurances to pay, you may have contractors to pay, you may have employees. And if there's money left over, you pay yourself. So realize that in the beginning, your income might fluctuate. And then some businesses do fail. And so there is that initial investment risk. So I used to say to people that if you wanted to leave now, it would be okay. But I'm gonna hopefully, because I have Jay coming in after me, I know you guys will be motivated to stay. It's very, very worthwhile. So what are your choices? Pretty simple. And I hope these cover the choices of the people that are in this group today. You can start something up yourself. You get a piece of paper, you start writing down the elements of this business. I'll talk about that in the business plan in a moment, but you could start something from scratch, your own idea. You can buy a business. And I don't know how many people here are considering that, but I've done that twice in my career with different partnerships, and it's worked out real well. Or if you don't have an idea, or if you don't have the expertise to take something that's of interest to you to market, then perhaps look at a franchise. And I'll put a plug in here for our session next Wednesday, when we'll be doing a similar dive on franchising as a career option. So for those of you who want to take your own idea and turn it into a business, these are some of the things that I think are important to consider. And it could be consulting, you could make a product, you could provide a labor service. It's quite broad, but is what you're doing, does it have some kind of an unfair advantage in the market to your competition? I'm not saying unethical, I'm saying unfair. And I always, when I was in college and I took some business classes, I remember the story of the Honda Civic. Now, back in the 70s, America had these big boat cars. Honda came in with this tiny little car. The US companies, first of all, they didn't recognize the market, and they could not change their processes to compete, and it created a foothold in the country for Honda. So is your idea, you want to make sure your idea is not a commodity where people are talking to you about, can you do it cheaper? You're doing it because it's something that is unique and has benefit to the client. Can you truly identify that customer base? And I said earlier, the things that you want to know is who they are, when they buy, how they buy, et cetera. Have you put together a realistic business plan? And I'm going to give you some highlights today of things that are important in that plan. Have you put together some kind of an advisory board? Are there people you trust? I learned a long time ago that if you are the smartest person in the room, it's time to go into a different room. Because we live in a wonderful world today where there's always someone who can help us learn something. And then if you're doing a startup too, I want to make sure that when we leave today, you know how to get connected to resources in our community that are very rich and not, there's no cost to them in many cases, that can help you. Okay, Jay, any questions coming up in the chat? I want to try to keep on schedule myself.
There's a question about, well, comment and question, I think. So I believe that if I go, if I'm shown how, I would be motivated, but I'm not sure how to do that. And I replied back actually and said, like, I think that we're shifting into that part of the presentation right now. Yeah. So yeah, you correct me if I'm wrong there, Jeff.
Well, we'll see. We'll come back to that question and learn a little bit more about the person asking it and try to help them before we're done today.
Cool.
So I mentioned that you've got this concept of startup, buying a business, et cetera. Let me give you the positives about starting your own business from your own idea. If you do that, the beauty of it, candidly, is everything is greenfield. You have the independence to do the business in the way that you think is best. Your creativity can come in. You can choose. When I say location, I'm meaning, how the product gets to market. Is it an internet product? Is it something that you physically go in and deliver yourself? So you have that freedom to determine how that service or product gets to market. All the procedures you create yourself, and you're not inheriting problems. When we buy a business or even look at a franchise, we are taking on somebody else's idea and trying to build on it. But in a startup, you're not inheriting anything, you're creating. The risk, though, the right side of the screen are the things you've got to be thoughtful about. And this happens with everyone that I've had the opportunity to meet or know. We tend to underestimate the time it takes to start a new business. And we tend to underestimate the time we spend on income producing activities versus things like putting my webpage together, or things like looking for real estate or hiring people. Those things don't make you money. So it ends up taking more time than we think. Independent businesses tend to have a fairly high rate of failure. So I personally tend to lean towards the buying a business or franchise side. And you are certainly on your own if you start your own business, but in the concept of preventing sort of like a flywheel approach where people hear the name, they know what you sell, and they're anxious to buy. That takes a while to get going, that strong brand identification with your customers. So that's just some of the positives, negatives. I will tell anyone who ever talks with me that if you can start something on your own and follow all the good business principles and grow it, not get in your own way. And when I say get in our own way, sometimes a founder has problems giving up control as a business grows, and the business might require other talents. Starting your own thing from scratch may be the best thing. So buying a business, usually it's a small group of people that attend these kind of sessions. So I'm going to cover it fairly quickly. But if you're ever thinking about buying a business, you have to determine what are the things you're looking to buy. What are the revenue size? What are the employee size? What's the location? What's the industry? So you have some criteria. And the reason the criteria is important is because the way you find a business to buy is you might go to accountants or attorneys, or you might go to business brokers, and they will ask you, what are you looking for? So you need to have that vision. There are people that are buyers brokers that can help significantly in identifying the kinds of, the opportunities to buy businesses that fall within your vision. And then the whole issue of valuing the business is a challenge. I can tell you stories if we had more time about how I learned the hard way when we were buying some businesses in the past. So for those of you who might be a little more energized about buying a business, some of the benefits, again, the left side of the screen, is once you have made that acquisition. I'm actually coaching two clients right now. One looking at a cooking oil servicing business that's a resale, and one looking at a furniture repair business. They're looking at buying resales, and the benefit to them is that once they go through all the negotiation due diligence, they've got a business that's up and running. They have customers, they have banking relationships. So there's some really positive elements about buying a business. The creativity stays there, but some of the limitations about how you bring product to market may not be able to be changed easily. And the other thing people don't realize is that when we consider buying a business, it's easier to finance. Think about it. You walk into a bank with a brand new idea that's never been done before, hard to get financed. You walk into a bank and saying, I'm acquiring a business that's had 10 years of experience, profits every year, sales go up every year, they're going to want to lend you money. So that's some of the positives about buying an existing business. Negatives is trying to figure out the right price. Everybody thinks their baby is better looking than you might think it is. So there's a finessing, and there's a maturity, there's experience that has to come in. And I'll call that a complicated due diligence. And you may not be able to change things easily if you buy a business. The concept of a franchise. I'm a franchise owner myself. That's what I decided to do because I like the predictability of it. Franchises are basically distribution methods. You're working with something that someone will buy at a set price. You're implementing a system. Franchises are regulated by state and federal law, so there's just a lot of information that's provided to you by the requirements of the law. And then many people don't realize it, that there's 80 different industries serviced by the franchise model. So those of you who want to be in your own business, but maybe at an earlier stage, and this might go to that question of that someone asked before, if you evaluate franchises, you may find people in that system have similar backgrounds to yourself, trying to accomplish similar goals, and that might be the proper channel. Staying consistent, I want to give you the positives and negatives. In a franchise, you have your own corporation, you're in business for yourself, but you're part of a system of people that are supporting you. There's some independence. You're not totally independent. Again, you've got to follow their rules, but they help you with real estate, with hiring, with financing, a lot of things that you may not be comfortable doing yourself, or potentially could make mistakes. The negatives about franchising is that you are not, it's sort of the opposite side of the coin. You're not entirely independent. You cannot go out and paint the McDonald's Golden Arches purple. It's just not going to happen. So you've got to work within those guidelines. You own a Subway, you're not going to do an 8-inch foot long. It's going to be a 12-inch foot long. The other negatives is that royalties are based on sales. There are certain fees that you pay to be part of the system. If the franchisor is not a visionary, that could be a problem. And they may put restrictions on some of the things that you might see as ways of enhancing the business that they may not be ready to do. So I want to just give you a flavor of the startup, buying a business, and the franchising. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit to something that's important to everyone here if you're thinking about starting your own business. And that is I'm calling this legal structure, but as I've given it more thought, it really is sort of the risk management, the risk mitigation. Because when we are in a business, some businesses have some degree of risk, and it's important to protect yourself, protect your assets. So the first thing we do is when we are ready to start our business, we set up a legal entity. It could be a C Corp, an LLC, or an S Corp. But typically it's not a sole proprietorship. A sole proprietorship does not have the protection of the corporate veil. So an entity like a C, LLC, or S corporation gives you what's called the protection of the corporate veil. And it means if someone sues you for something that they think you did wrong, if you had a corporation that is currently registered, you typically would go to the judge and say, hey, look, I was operating in good faith as an officer of my duly registered company, and I do not believe these people can sue me personally. And what would normally happen is the judge would put aside those things that might relate to you personally and just deal with your corporation. And that is a way of protecting your personal assets. Now, I will tell you that if you ever did something that was perceived as negligent or something that was illegal, or if, for example, you backed up something with a personal guarantee, those things can pierce the corporate veil. And I would suggest that you want to think about a couple of things. One, how many people will own your company? What's the ownership structure? What is the way you're funding the company? How is the money going to flow into the company? And what is your exit strategy? Are you going to take this thing public? Are you going to keep it as a family business? If you think of those three things, who are the owners? How do you raise capital? And what's the exit strategy? If you go to an accountant, they will give you the best advice as to what's the best structure you want to have. My company today is an S Corp. I've had it for 21 years. It's worked out great. For the prior 17 years, I was a partner in an LLC. Again, it just depends on what the circumstance is. So this chart might help you understand a little bit more before you talk to that accountant. And I want to mention at this point, and I haven't done this in prior seminars, but I think it's really important. Incorporation by itself is not the only risk mitigation thing that you should be thinking about. You should also be thinking about, do you need appropriate insurances? So if you're going to be a consultant, do you have errors and omissions insurance? If you're building a product, you have general liability insurance. So if the product were to fail or someone might have got hurt, et cetera. So step two is talk to a commercial insurance broker, and they will tell you what the risk profile and what you should spend on insurance for your business. And then lastly, and we tend to not think about this because we're all excited about getting orders, is make sure that any paperwork that goes between you and the customer has the proper disclaimers on it. If you accept a purchase order from a customer, if you read the back of it, it's usually giving you all the liability. So if you're in a business where you're giving proposals to somebody, you got to make sure that your paperwork clearly defines your scope of work and the limits of your liability. Okay. So I see 6 chats coming in. Jay, I'm assuming you're monitoring that for me because I got to rock and roll here to finish in my hour. Financing, gosh, this just gives you an idea of where most people, 39% of people finance small businesses from cash, 20% finance them through using like a 401k vehicle to access capital, family and friends. Surprisingly, SBA loans are a very small part of the overall financing. Okay, so I don't know if that echo was me. I think it might have been somebody else. So this is a topic we can talk about more maybe in the questions and answer side of things. I do want you to think if maybe we can put somebody who's not on mute, maybe if you can put yourself on mute, there's a little bit of a reverberation going on. Build your team. Your team has to have an accountant, an attorney. These are not employees. These are people you find by referrals from other people, but they're really important. And I put insurance agents on here because it's not like you go to Allstate or State Farm or the Gecko. You need to talk to a commercial broker. Develop relationships with a bank, both for your lending and for your credit card purchasing, credit card servicing, et cetera. And also on your stakeholder list, find a mentor is someone who is willing to give you their time, not charge you for their time. They like you, they're in a similar industry, they've got experience. Seek out mentors for help. And then coaches are a little different. Coaches are typically someone that does have some economic benefit from working with you, but they keep you accountable to your goals and help you along the way. So business planning. Every business needs a plan. And those of you who are thinking about just charging ahead and taking commitments from customers without a plan, you've heard this before. If you don't have a plan to succeed, you have a plan to fail. So every business needs a plan. If you're going to walk into a bank and borrow money, and at some point, even my little consulting business today, there were times when things got a little lumpy, and I wanted to have a credit line that I could draw on with a bank. I had to give them a plan. Here's what my business looked like. Here's what my cash needs look like. So the plan helps you rationalize the business. And the elements of the plan, and here I've listed them out. I'm going to suggest that we start with the financial documents. And I know for some of us, those are not the most fun, but can you predict revenue? When will the revenue actually start coming in? Sales actually coming in? What is it going to cost you to produce every one of those sales? And what are your overhead costs? And therefore, you can start to predict your profit and loss. And it has to be realistic. And in addition to those, or within the financial documents, you want to have a balance sheet. So does the company have assets? Does it have liabilities? Is it financially sound? An accountant can help you with this. If you use QuickBooks, it will automatically generate the balance sheet for you. And then most critical to the business is a cash flow statement. And cash flow looks at when the actual cash is coming in, and understand there's a difference between sales and cash. So let's say, Stacy, I sell you something and you're happy with it. And my terms are pay me in 30 days, but you don't pay me for 60 days. My business has a problem. So I have to keep track of when my cash goes out and when my cash comes in. And obviously you need enough of positive cash flow to keep the business going. Once the financial documents seem to make some sense, then I think you want to go to the executive summary and be able to determine, who are your customers? What is the team that you're putting together to access those customers? and what is the return on the investment for the business? So what is the economic proposition of the business? So financial documents, executive summary are what I think the key things. If these don't make sense, I wouldn't go much further. If they do make sense, then you start putting the meat on the bones. What does the organization look like? What does competition look like? How are you going to deliver these products and services? What's the pricing structure, et cetera? And those are the marketing plan. And also include a statement of the risks in the business. You know, when I've gone out before and pitched to investors, they've all said, hey, that sounds like a great plan, but what can go wrong? What are the things that would submarine this business? And in my earlier days, when I was more naive, I would say nothing. We had a great plan, you know, just invest your money. I've learned that that's not the way people expect managers to run a business or owners to run a business. You got to think about what potentially can go wrong. If you need help, this is a good software program. I don't sell any of this stuff, but it was recommended to me. If you do TurboTax, then probably you'd be comfortable with this. With some of the resources we'll share with you, there's a lot of other ways of putting together a business plan. There are websites supported by the Small Business Administration that have business plan formats that are already designed for what a bank's requirements are. So in the 3 minutes I have reasonably left before we get on to the main act, let me talk about what do you do from here. And again, I just want to stress, you can't from this kind of talk say, hey, I got everything I need, I'm ready to go. But hopefully I've got you thinking about the things that you need. So first thing is we have what's called a Small Business Administration, the SBA. It has affiliates that are in our community specifically to help you. And so I look up sba.gov, I think /WA Washington, and you'll see a lot of resources. You can also follow up with Jay and I for more specific things. Five Mountain Press is a publishing company that has a couple of books that I thought were helpful. One is called How to Evaluate Any Business at for under $100. And Jay, maybe when you have a chance, I wouldn't do it now. See if you can find that book, and if it's a library resource. Now, we want to push as many things to the library as we can, of course. The next one on here is the Small Business Development Corporation. If you have a business you've already started, the SBDC will give you a free, professionally trained counselor to be your coach, to be your mentor, to help you move it forward. Franchise.org is the International Franchise Association. If you want to look at top 500 franchises, you can go there and be very helpful. Although I would recommend, if you're thinking about the franchise side, please come to next week's program before you get too far down the road. Meetups, I don't know how many of you are familiar with meetups, but pre-pandemic, I was very active in local meetups. I just recently went back to meetup.com, and there is a link under this URL here. You can find meetups either Zoom or in person in almost any category of interest to you or your business. And I'd recommend get out and do some networking. SCORE is one of the affiliates that I work very closely with. I know Jay does as well. They're part of the SBA. They have 110 qualified, trained, free mentors to help you develop your business from where you are today to where you want it to be. Great program. We can talk to you more about that. If any of you are in the funding phase where you're trying to figure out what could you borrow, we actually did this when we did some work for the King County Library, but this will work. It's a generic link to a company that funds businesses, and if you give them some information, it's not very invasive. They will tell you what you could likely borrow if you provided more information to them. And they're an SBA broker. They have any number of financing resources. And again, I always encourage you to reach out to me if there's something I can help you with, either by email, or if you're not in my database and you call me, I might put you in voicemail until I can read it. Too many spam messages these days. And of course, we made a special slide just for the library because they, as Jay will tell you in a moment, they're great. This is one of the books that he has available. I'm sure he'll tell you how to get to them. I wrote a book that's still very successful, and it's in the library, and it's also available on audible.com. And so I'll just close up by saying that wherever you guys are today, look at your life to this point as truly an education and lessons, and that you're ready to take on this next future of owning your own business, realizing that problems are things you can manage and work towards your future. So Jay, I went a minute over. You'll have to put me in the penalty box. Call me Kraken. And shall I just hit escape and get out of my slides, or I'll stop the share?
Yeah, if you stop the share, then I will start my share. Thank you, Jeff. There's so much there. Like and like I said at the beginning, every time I see this, I learn something new. And I've seen it a lot of times, and I learn something new every time. So it just keeps getting, this presentation keeps getting better and better.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm gonna share a few things, and then I'll close things out, and we'll and those, you know, we'll open it up for Q&A. So I'm gonna share a presentation so that we can kind of look at this together. Can you all see my slides? Let me get into share mode for that. Let's see, where is it? Bear with me here. Okay, I found it. There we go. Can everyone see the information businesses need slide here? Okay. So as we were talking, I was thinking about like some of the ways that the library helps. Actually, I'm going to back up because I want us to talk about like 3 ways the library helps. Number one way we can help you out as a business owner, or not, if you're thinking about a nonprofit, is that we answer questions. And today's world, we can set up appointments 1 hour at a time with a librarian trained in business research and market data. And I've got a link there in my slide deck where you can click on that and find a time that me or my colleagues are available and book that time. Those are all virtual appointments at this point, and they could be by phone or by online meeting. Either one works. If you don't find a time that works for you in there, I encourage you to reach out at that l2b@spl.org or to me directly, or both, and I'll find a time that I'll offer some other times, and we'll find something that works, because we want to support you. We know that sometimes all of the times that we have offered don't all work for everyone, so we'll work out something. I'm going to dive into some of these other things. The second way that we help is that we buy tools that you can use. I'll share some examples here, but we'll also, in that conversation, we'll actually talk about the tools that will be most useful, and then share how to get into those tools. And then the last one there that I have on the screen is free workshops and events. So of course, we're in one of the workshops today, but like this afternoon, we had legal consults with attorneys. Today's consults were with corporate law attorneys, and they were able to help out about 7 entrepreneurs that came today. Tomorrow we have some that are real estate law attorneys. I'm going to show you how to get in and book those sessions. I would love for all of them to be booked, and most of them are available at this point. So if you are thinking about like, how do I start down this path of getting a space, or like, how do I think about the contract that I need to sign, all those kind of things, those legal aspects of real estate law, tomorrow afternoon, we have some experts that you can talk to. Those, unlike today, today is a whole workshop with lots of us. Those are your time, one-to-one, confidential with the attorney. It's actually 2-to-1 because we bring a UW law student who takes notes for you. So that's value added. So I'll share how to get into those in a minute. But tomorrow's real estate law, and then Friday we have more even too, and I'll show you how to book those as well. And then more workshops are on the horizon too. So we're working on those. Of course, we shared about the workshop for next week too on franchise. So if that's sparking interest, please sign up. We'd love to have you there. I won't dive too deeply in here, but libraries are local. I'm of course here talking about the Seattle Public Library, but I'm also talking about libraries. And if you're located somewhere beyond the city limits of Seattle, your local library you might be surprised at what your local library actually has in terms of like tools that they subscribe to. But then I won't dive too deeply, but if we could talk more about these reciprocal agreements between library systems. So if you're a Pierce County library card holder, you can get a Seattle Public Library card and a King County card and a Snow Isle card. And like I can go on and on, but they don't go too far, but they definitely can take us to reciprocal agreements between nearby counties. And I'm happy to talk more about that as well too. And you don't have to be a library card holder to attend workshops, to come to consults. This is all about just the way that we have the licensing set up for the tools that I'll share about. That's what that's about. You have to have a library card to get into some of these research tools remotely, but you don't have to have a library card to sign up for our time or anything like that. We had just talked about this, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail there. And I will say, like, we do have books. Jeff mentioned a few of them. We're going to talk mostly about electronic resources, but people still check out business books, and people still write business books, and those can be a helpful thing. But most of the time, when people are coming to us with questions, we're talking about market research that's going to go into that business plan. So how do I find my customers? As somebody asked in the chat earlier, how do I find lists of my competitors so I can start to understand what they do? I can like figure out ways that I can do that better, or look at what they've done really well that I might want to also do. Those kinds of data. And then market trends are another kind of category there too. Like, is this industry growing? Is it shrinking? What should I be aware of? What's keeping other business owners up at night when it comes to trends happening in a market? And I think about all of that as telling a story. And the story is how your business is being successful in the future. And that's illustrated by the star, viability. My business was viable. I'm looking back from the 20 years from now, I'm looking back and like telling this story of how this thing happened. And if we think about that viability, you can see the arrows, and I intentionally made the customer arrow really big, and it comes closer to the star. The competition arrow, well, it pierces that little circle, but it's not coming all the way to the star. Trends, not as big, but it's coming close to the star also. So all of those like trends and things, like all those things come together to tell that story. And so that's my kind of analogy of how I would love for the arrows to all be lined up and in one shot. But the reality is that we're going to different resources to bring those together to tell that story. So that's how I'm often kind of thinking about and how I'm describing market research and research in general. Down at the bottom, I've got some challenges. Things can be expensive. Business information is often proprietary, so we don't find, there might be a wall between what we can access and what another company has done. And so that's sometimes a challenge. And then sometimes it's not in the form we expect. So if maybe I'm looking for like, how big is this market? How much money do people spend on this? And then I'm finding something else. Like sometimes I need to sort of back up and think about it differently. And then I find some stuff that's useful. All of that is stuff that we'll work with you on. So don't feel like you have to do that alone, because we have expert researchers with master's degree in library science who are there to help. And every one of them has gone through training that I designed personally. So I know that they know about how to use these tools. I'm going to power through quickly, and then I'll come back and we'll take some questions in the Q&A part of it. But I want to share a couple of examples. One is this one called Data Axle. This is a company research tool. So I'm able to create lists of companies by industry. So let's say I'm trying to create a list of pet stores in Seattle. Here we go. It can very quickly take us to, here's a list. Here's the company name, their location, the owner's name, all those kind of things. Directories are all directories have the same issue, and that is that businesses are constantly changing, and so the directory is constantly keeping up of trying to track that change. So sometimes a particular company is they changed ownership or changed location. So then the directory, like Data Axle, is trying to keep up and try to figure out, are they still in business? Did they just move? Did they add a location? Is this still the owner? So just be aware that sometimes you find misleading kinds of information there, and 6 months later might be back. Hard to know in the moment, like which is which, but be skeptical, ask questions of the data, and that way you're coming at it with that coming at the data with that skeptical approach is a good thing, because you're going to make decisions based on this, and so it's best to have that the best that you can. Another kind of data through this one called Demographics Now is consumer expenditures. This slide right here, I'm kind of mapping out how much money people who live in certain areas spend on brunch. So Central District of Seattle, $518. Nationally, $300 is the national average by household. That's a really big difference, really big difference. And if you look at Central District, even comparing that to citywide, it's still higher, so, well, there's some great brunch restaurants, so people are probably going out to brunch in that neighborhood. But this is the kind of data that you can get at the library and that we're buying for you and you can use for free. Another kind of thing that people are often asking us about, well, we have demographic information, which of course Demographics Now has that as well, but demographics can only take us so far. And if we can understand lifestyle segmentation, lifestyle information, we can go a lot further with marketing. So the one I have on the screen here, Cosmopolitan Achievers, I've got some kind of typical key features of this lifestyle group. And you can see over on the left-hand side, Cosmopolitan Achievers are one of many that are there. And I just chose this one. Well, you'll see on this next slide why I chose them. But if this was my target audience that I really want to reach with my product or service, I can start to understand how to create marketing that's appealing to them. And down here in that channel preference, that's how I can reach them. So this is telling me right off that radio, no, they're not going to respond to that. Snail mail, no. Actually, there are some groups that do respond to snail mail, but this is not one of them. But TV or streaming video, text messaging, email marketing, or social media marketing, all fine. Those are all above the norm. So I can start to understand, which channels I should invest my time and energy into trying to reach reach my potential customers. And then in the next slide, I'm that's a similar way. This is why I chose them. So 8.92% of Seattle are this cosmopolitan achiever lifestyle. So I can really start to now understand that, nearly 10% of my audience in Seattle, if I've got a location in that area, is like gonna, text messaging. So I can use all that data to start to understand how to reach them. And then here's an example of a market trend. So that third category of spending on pet costumes. And you can see up there on the screen, you've got that like wonderful, like $350 million are spent on costumes for pets. And in 2022, pet spending for Halloween was expected to reach $710 million. Those two, that's, so you could look at that as growth, but if you look fairly carefully, the way that that's phrased, like one is about pet costumes, the other one's about pet spending for Halloween. So maybe there's other like pet toys that are in there. So be cautious and careful about like what you're looking at there too. That's that whole part of like data sometimes isn't in the form I would expect. But we'll help you through that part of it too. I'm gonna skip past this one. I just want to highlight this one, and then we'll get to the Q&A because I know we're getting close to. I want to leave plenty of time for that. But this is another example of a different kind of market trend report. We get these Dun & Bradstreet first research reports through a database, and these can be like really nice shortcuts to what's going on in my industry. So in this case, I chose the pet food manufacturing industry, and you can see trends and things. We get some data that could be useful as we start to understand the financials, typical financials of companies in the industry. A lot of data here. If this looks scary though, which numbers can be scary for me too, then like Jeff was talking about earlier, SCORE, Business Impact Northwest, Ventures. We have all these amazing organizations that are there to help us in that mentorship fashion, and they could help us understand what some of these some of these numbers mean, how to apply them, like how should I interpret these numbers. And then I talked about these earlier. I'm actually going to go out to the website and show you how to do that. And I'll do that right now, but we have all these legal workshop or legal consults. They're one-on-one time with an attorney. I'll do that in a moment. I'm just going to share about this too. People are always interested in this. So if you're trying to like build up your skills around marketing or building a website or something, we of course have workshops and stuff that we're doing, but we also subscribe to LinkedIn Learning, which is a whole it's a whole set of workshops, all high quality things, very relevant on technical topics, business topics. So you can just use our subscription, using your library card, and you can save yourself $30 a month and have full access to this. That's what it costs if you go out and you start with LinkedIn. So start on our webpage and then use your library card instead of your credit card. I like that little phrase. Let's use our library cards instead of our credit cards in this case. Okay, this was the slide I wanted to end on. So I'm gonna go back out to the library's webpage. I'll stop my share because I want to show you how to sign up for those legal consults because I think that they're amazing. And then we'll close out and then we'll dive into Q&A. All right, so here I'm just changing my share, so bear with me for a moment.
And while Jay's doing that, anybody who has questions, maybe just put your hand up and we'll make sure that we cover everybody.
Yes.
And
okay, so this is the library's webpage, spl.org. If I go to programs and services, business and nonprofit, that's where you can find all the stuff that we were just talking about. And if you scroll down here to business research tools, those are those tools that we were just talking about. So demographics now, first research, all that. But I would go to the appointments first, because we're going to show you how to use those tools, how to dive in, like which ones are going to be useful, because otherwise it's easy to get lost. Believe me, how do I know? I've been lost in there many, many times. So, but under business appointments, scroll down to legal consults. And here they are. So today's consults were in Spanish. So that was amazing. We had 7 of the 8 that came there. Tomorrow's are real estate consults. And you just click on register. It asks you some questions and it'll send you the Zoom link right there. Then on Friday, intellectual property law. So if you got questions about patent, trademark, copyright, there's a whole bunch of them, and just select one that says register online rather than join the wait list. Join the wait list isn't a bad strategy, but you can see there's plenty available. So use those, do those, and then you have a for sure booking. And then there'll be more corporate law ones on the 16th. These are in English. We'll do more Spanish ones as well, and we're working on other languages too. So that's what I wanted to share. I'm going to stop my share, and then we'll stop the recording, and then we'll do some Q&A and have some conversation. But I want to thank our presenter Jeff first, and I'm going to thank our online audience who is watching this at some point in the future. Maybe it's some of us that are also watching it, but Jeff, do you have a few like closing words you want to say? And then I'll.
Nope, I'm anxious to get into the Q&A. Other than just tell everybody I appreciate their time, and hopefully we can link in and just stay in contact. So Dan, I think you had the first hand up.
All right, thanks all.